This is Marsh Farm, Burnham Deepdale in North Norfolk, and everything that you see behind me is the result of one man's vision. The determination of Andrew Crean to restore this place from arable land, as it was 20 years ago, to the diverse and beautiful habitat for wildlife that it is today.
I came here and bought this place in 2007. I'd been looking for a marsh for a long time. Mainly I'd looked in Essex and Suffolk, and finally I came here in 2007. And when we bought the place, this was all still cereal crop, so it was still being farmed down to the seawall. And originally I came as a wildfowler, but it soon became obvious to me that wildfowling and shooting the geese that come here was really a meaningless thing to do. And in my mind's eye, what I'd wanted to do is to recreate a freshwater marsh. It's difficult to understand where this love of marsh and this dream to own a marsh first came from. But I think it first came from a book which I read when I was a child, The Snow Goose by Paul Gallagher. And that set in my mind the idea of wild places and wild things. My father's game books, which I used to read as a child, had his adventures written up with Peter Scott and other wildfowlers on the East Coast. When I first came, it was not easy to see the dream. These fields out here were corn, arable, wheat and barley, and had been really since the war. And in my mind's eye, what I wanted to do was to return them to freshwater marsh. I think the sounds of the marsh which are most resonant and most redolent are still the geese. When they come back in November and you hear them high in the sky, the skeins coming in and the calling of the geese, that is something which each year calls you back and reminds you of the turn in the year and how things move. And then in the summer, I think the wild calls of the red-shanked wardens of the marsh, lapwing and curlew, and I've slowly begun to understand how they exist and where they move in the summer and how they live their lives. I think it's that slow turnover and that's increasing understanding which has been an enormous joy to me. I recognise that I'm enormously lucky to have been able to do this. I've been incredibly lucky with the people around me. And it's really them, Mark and Simon, and now Chrissy, who've really led me on and taken me by the hand and walked me down a path. Because it's they who really have the knowledge, and they who really have the love for this place. And it is they who've really encouraged me to move on and to develop the place as we are now. So I've been here nearly 20 years, and I recognise that's a very, very short amount of time. And I'll be here for a little longer until I go. But what is absolutely lovely is that I know my daughter Honor will take this forward. And so, generation to generation, I would hope that we'll be able to keep this place as a wild place and keep it for the birds which come and go between summer and winter.
One bird never seen in coastal Norfolk is the capercaillie, which in the UK is found only in Scotland, where the marsh warden Mark Andrew began his conservation journey.
My story getting here is a roundabout story. I started off working in the Highlands on capercaillie and black grouse and migrated south and was working inland on grey partridges. And one day I got a knock on the door from Andrew Crean saying he had a vision for this piece of marsh, or converting it to a marsh. Could I help? So I thought about it for about 3 seconds and said, yeah, that's something I'm really keen on being involved with. And so I started here September 2009. We had one last harvest off it, one last crop, and then between Andrew and I, we set about reverting this back into a fresh marsh, but at one time this would have been a salt marsh. The water levels are held up by a single sluice. So the water heads west into the salt marsh and out to sea. We have a sluice which controls all our water. We're very fortunate. We have 3 springs that we know about feeding the site. And even in the driest of driest years, we still have water on site. We are told that our water comes from the Lincolnshire Wolds. It comes under the wash through an aqua system, and then it rises up in the North Norfolk coast. As I said, we never have to worry about water. We've always got good water. The marsh as you see it today is made up of very linear dikes, or ditches, some people call them drains, which have been helped to drain the land for the wartime effort of providing food. And the other images you'll notice from the air, we've got some very winding, bendy creeks, and these we've manufactured ourselves. And what we were able to do from the dry summers, we could see where the old creek beds once meandered throughout the marsh. And so using those images of the old creek beds, we then tried to create the creek beds as were. They're carrying fresh water, they're no longer tidal, but there would be some of them that would be similar as to would have been 200-300 years ago, and now with fresh water in. We have Highland cattle on site, and these are very much part of the conservation management of this marsh. They've got big feet, they poach the ground, and each little poaching hole creates a little puddle, which then in turn has a host of insects, invertebrates around it, which is all good for foraging young waders in particular. The cattle are left to their own devices. They're very organic. There isn't any intervention. We don't use worming agents. So it's all about grazing and lots of nice manure to attract the insects and invertebrates.
Mark's team of Highland cattle may be mighty beasts, but with him, they're playful family friends.
June time, we bring a bull in, and so it's a bull, it's fresh blood, And hopefully, if all goes well, the bull will be here June, July, and we end up calving in April to May, which is always a nice time of year. These animals are seldom handled. They don't go into sheds. They live all their life on the marsh. The vet intervention is very minimal.
You take him for a pet if you want him.
The bull is a great big thing, softy. He does his job and then he goes home and probably goes to other pastures and does his business elsewhere. To the southwest corner of Deepdale Marsh, we have a little wood known as Marsh Farm Car. And this little wood looks very insignificant. It's very important. It has a good relationship between the marsh and the wood itself. It is a roost through most of the year. In particular in the winter, we can have 140, mainly little egrets with a few great white.
At dusk, little, great and cattle egrets pour into the wood to roost in the safety of the fir trees. Barely 2 decades ago, these species were known in Norfolk only as scarce vagrants, but all three are now increasing as breeders, thanks to climate change and to the ideal conditions created on the newly reclaimed marsh. What appears to be squabbling is in fact pre-breeding intimacy. There's hope that in time this group behaviour will lead to the establishment of a breeding colony of herons and little egrets at Deepdale. These night shots reveal behaviour seldom filmed or even witnessed anywhere in the country. At first light, the egrets spread out across the marshes to feed.
The wood also hosts water rail. There's a little pond which is frequented by bathing tawny owls. We know that sparrowhawks are down there bathing. The deer will go and have a drink in there. And it hosts a whole load of teal and gadwall. And these duck use it as a daytime roost and then go out to feed in the evening. We also have kingfisher using the site.
This tiny pond is now the territory of a male kingfisher. With his sharp, piercing whistle and his spectacular plumage, he aims to attract a female. The pond is busy with both fish and amphibians. And below the kingfisher is another fish eater, the little grebe. On the branch above, the male kingfisher uses his skill as a hunter, offering a fat fish as a traditional part of courtship. A pair bond has been formed.
The wood itself is also loved, if you like, and it's a little haven. We keep very quiet. We allow the wood to grow and fall as it wishes, so there's lots of fallen timber for insects and inverts in there. So again, a nice little relationship between the marsh and wood. Being next to the North Sea here on the North Norfolk coast, we have the good times. We also experience harsh conditions, driving snow, driving rain, laying snow, but it's all part of the system. And the birds, they sit there huddled up, but they're used to these conditions, whether it's bright sunshine through to driving snow. The marsh is very special to me, and I love it through all the seasons. I like it when you get the first new growth of reed and the birds associated with the reed, whether it's the sedge, reed warbler, bearded tits. And then through the summer, watching the grasses get the seed heads on and blowing in the wind, and then through into the autumn. You've got the fledgling birds departing, but I've also got half an ear open for the pink-footed geese. At the end of August, I'm always got my ears cocked to the sky, waiting, listening for the first sound of the pink-footed geese. And they often arrive at the end of August. If not, they're certainly here by the first week of September. It is marvellous watching these geese. We're fortunate to have a hide on the marsh, and I can sneak into there in the morning in the middle of the winter, watch the geese. You can see the breath coming out of their beaks. And all seasons are marvellous to me, but the autumn one is the one I look forward to. One of the great excitements is when the geese come back in from their feed onto their roost site. They do something which is called whiffling. And this is where the geese twist nearly 180 degrees and very near on their backs. Their head will be very upright, and yet their belly will be up in the air and their backs towards the ground, and it's called whiffling. And this is not only a great sight, it's also a great sound. There's various theories as to why geese whiffle. I think that they enjoy doing it. The pink-footed geese arrive here, and they're coming all the way from Iceland, Spitsbergen. It's reckoned they're probably a 36-hour journey for them to get here. So when they get to Deepdale, they're very often very tired geese, and the first thing they do, they'll have a wash and a brush up, and then they'll sit with their heads under the wings. And they'll probably do that for a day or two. We play host to up to 10,000 geese through the winter.
Among these great flocks of ducks and geese now using the marshes are many species of wader. Redshank, sandpipers, godwits and ruff all visit. And here, unusually, a dozen greenshank. Largest of all the wildfowl to make Deepdale their winter home are pink-footed geese. Elsewhere along the coast, these birds are hunted and harassed by wildfowlers, but here they know they're on safe ground. They're content with the quiet security of the marsh, where no hidden gunners threaten their existence. But they're always on the lookout for danger. When the threat has passed, they return to the safety of their roost. Where family feuds and squabbles can continue. All through the night, the geese remain vigilant. Ripples of nervous energy move through the flock as a threat is perceived in the dark. This time, it's a false alarm. A Chinese water deer, though not native to our coast, is no threat at all to the geese. A more major concern is finding enough calories to survive the day.
The geese in this part of North Norfolk have at the mercy of the food they can find and farmers allowing them to be. There's not the food that was once here on Norfolk arable fields. When they arrive, it's stubble fields, and they glean on the stubbles. And then traditionally, they would go into sugar beet fields, which they still do, but farmers are growing less and less sugar beet. And this is having an impact. On top of that, farming is evolving, changing, modern ways, modern machinery, and the modern machinery tends to leave less sugar beet top and tends to cover the sugar beet top with soil. So a field of sugar beet, which would once have kept geese happy and fed for many days. Sometimes within 2 or 3 days, these fields are gleaned of all greenery, and then the geese either move elsewhere or they get chivied about with the farmers who are not wanting them on their growing winter wheat. On top of our teal and gadwall, we host pintail, which is always very nice to see, and shoveler in nice numbers in the spring. A few of the shoveler will stay to breed with us. And often when we've got both these species on site, we can be listening to the bittern booming. And it's nice to play host to breeding booming bitterns.
No other marsh bird is as perfectly camouflaged in a reed bed as the bittern. To see a bittern out of the cover of the reeds in daylight is a rare sight. This cryptic species was once driven to the very brink of extinction in the UK, but thanks to practical reed bed management, it has recovered, and the deep boom of the male can be heard in spring wherever reed bed is maintained. A nervous bittern adopts a unique upright posture, which perfectly conceals it in the cover of reeds. But here in the open, it looks absurd. Another equally peculiar long-legged denizen of the marsh, with a bill shaped like a ladle, has only recently returned to the Norfolk coast after 400 years of absence.
We're very fortunate here at Burnham Deepdale on our area of water we call the Deepdale Broad, in as much that it's one of the major chosen sites for fledging or fledged spoonbills. They will come here with Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad will leave them here on the lagoon for the day, and it becomes very much a nursery stroke creche. Mum and Dad will then go foraging onto the salt marsh or elsewhere to find food, and the youngsters are waiting there, head under wings. But when Mum and Dad arrives, it's all a frenzy, lots of bill tapping and clapping and thrusting of the bill down Mum or Dad's throat for food time, and that is always a very exciting time. We are now hosting up to 60 odd birds throughout the autumn, so starting mid-July through August and into September. We are very much part and parcel of the ongoing expansion of the spoonbill population. Another feature that's new to Deepdale Marsh is otters. When we first started creating this marsh, we had our water voles, which was very nice, but now we are hosting otters. I've been aware of 2 youngsters in previous years. They frequent all the waterways, and they even venture into the woodland on a night time and forage around the edges to see what they can find. So they are very much part and parcel of Deepdale Marsh. Deepdale now, we're going into a new chapter. We're now hosting corn crake and curlew breeding programs from Pensthorpe. We've now got a charitable trust, the Deepdale Conservation Trust, and we are hoping that we can breed good numbers of these birds, which will then be released to suitable sites elsewhere in hopefully East Anglia, but maybe in the future further afield, and help re-establish these populations elsewhere in Britain.
Mark understands the great good fortune he has to be out on the marsh every day. Over his years here, he's witnessed a huge variety of native wildlife, which either visit or call this place home. Many are shy, and many are scarce elsewhere in the UK. Trusting brown hares, visiting migrant birds, hunting stoats, and a gleaming lapwing, a bird once numerous as a breeder in the British landscape, but now, sadly, a declining rarity. Happily, another wader still thrives here. Every year, 2 or 3 pairs of oyster-catchers nest on the open grass at Deepdale. This highly distinctive black and white bird, with a vivid orange beak, is bold enough to ignore what to us seem like obvious risks of predation. Always alert to predatory birds like marsh harriers, the parent oyster-catchers defend their eggs with a bold defiance. Though they know that sometimes discretion is the better part of valour, and it is safer to retreat. This leaves their eggs temporarily exposed, but it is a strategy which clearly works, most of the time. A relative newcomer to the Norfolk coast is the elegant Chinese water deer. It thrives in dense reed beds, but has recently spread onto surrounding arable land. It seems to pose no threat to the native species of the reed, which teems with bird life, including reed and sedge warblers. The pure, clean water of the marsh is home to a wide range of damselflies and dragonflies. Unseen for much of the year, they develop as larvae beneath the surface of the water. But come springtime, huge numbers emerge fully formed, revealing themselves as masters of the air. However fast they can fly, however nimble, dragonflies are still vulnerable to the talons of a hungry bird, if it can catch them. The hobby is a small migratory falcon, which arrives in spring and feeds extensively on dragonflies. In this case, these are 4-spotted chasers. Hurtling just above the water along the straight dikes, our hobby seldom misses its target. Again and again it enjoys the plump flesh of a 4-spotted chaser. The shallow lagoons of Deepdale Marsh are perfect habitat for avocets, which were long the rarest breeding wader in Britain. The avocet was extinct as a British breeding bird for around a century until 1947, when it returned to nest in East Anglia. It is now well established wherever conditions are right. Here at Deepdale, the shallow pools are precisely the right depth for their unique sweeping feeding technique. That such a distinctive black and white bird should choose to nest in such an exposed place is hard to believe. But the birds have 23 to 25 days to keep vigil on their eggs by the edge of the water. This rustic hide in the reeds was designed for watching birds on the pools, but itself has become home to a barn owl which roosts on a shelf above the door. From its day-roosting perch, the owl hears everything that happens on the marsh. Neighbours clatter and honk as they pass, including these noisy resident greylag geese. The owl snoozes through most of the daylight hours, but the smallest sound attracts its attention. Though clearly a fly is not seen as a meal, it is a distraction while the owl prepares himself for a night of hunting. There are itches to be scratched and talons to be tested. The owl has ignored all of his other neighbours, but is angered when a fellow barn owl tries to share its living space. the owl is having none of it. This is its own safe haven. One of the most recent birds to colonise the marsh is the spoonbill. This lanky wader has evolved an absurd beak, which enables its distinctive feeding technique, sweeping its bill from side to side in shallow water to catch small fish and invertebrates. Andrew and Mark have the joy of witnessing all of this scarce wildlife within sight of their homes. When he hears the distant boom of the bittern, Mark is reassured that all is well on the marsh. To a marshman like him, this is the sound of perfect contentment. Just like the bittern, Mark is happiest when he too blends into the wild Norfolk landscape. On the biggest spring tides of the year, coastal saltmarsh floods right up to the sea wall, forcing wading birds onto the relative safety of Deepdale Broad, where they feed, preen, and rest. The biggest of them all is the Eurasian curlew, a species in steep decline across its range on account of habitat loss from modern farming, increased predation, and human disturbance. This curlew has a yellow flag 7X on its upper leg, which identifies it as a graduate from a headstarting programme. Headstarting means taking eggs which have little or no chance of survival in the wild, hatching them in incubators and rearing the chicks in captivity for eventual return to the wild. In September 2024, Marsh Farm, Burnham Deepdale, was ready to take its next major step in bird conservation, with the creation of Deepdale Conservation Trust. And one of its first projects was curlew headstarting. It took months to prepare the specialist facilities required. Agricultural constructors, who normally build polytunnels for growing vegetables, came instead to make enclosures for birds. By springtime, the pens were fully predator-proof. Everything was in place and the real work could begin.
My name's Chrissy Kelly and I'm Head of Aviculture here at Deepdale Conservation Trust, which means I've got the great job of rearing lots of baby curlews.
The Norfolk Curlew Headstarting project has been running since 2021 and is now based at Marsh Farm. The first step is to rescue the eggs. Graham Irvin is licensed by Natural England to collect curlew eggs from RAF airfields, where the adult birds pose a flight risk to military aircraft. The eggs are then transported in a portable incubator. On arrival, Graham hands Chrissy his precious cargo. Each egg is then transferred into an incubator, which has been preset to the perfect parameters for embryo development.
Clutch 14, egg 2.
Throughout the 30-day incubation, each egg is lovingly weighed, measured, and candled. Shining light through the shell reveals how soon the egg will hatch. This tiny wobble is the first external sign of life within. Chrissy monitors each single egg through incubation. When they're ready, they're moved to a dedicated hatcher. Hatching can take up to 3 exhausting days for these tiny, helpless creatures. This almost magical process never fails to delight even the most experienced observer. These plaintive squeaks are not random. They are the chick's first calls to the incubating parent bird. Once out of the shell, the chick needs time to recover from the Herculean effort of escaping its protective prison and to dry out its fluffy feathers. Each numbered eggshell relates to one of 14 original airfields where they were collected. The hangar-like huts in which the chicks will grow are named after the airfields. Each chick is given its own identity number on a coloured plastic leg ring. Once fully dried out, they're transferred into dedicated brooder tanks. The 14 brooder tanks soon fill up with hungry, fast-growing chicks. Their growth rate is monitored by regular weighing. As so many eggs arrive around the same time, they all hatch within a few days of one another.
88.4.
The team soon has 50 baby curlews to care for. The chicks are carefully taken from their indoor brooders to their new home in the polytunnels. It's a challenging new world of fresh air and blue sky. In the care of such precious creatures, biosecurity is of the utmost importance. The protocol at every visit is the same. Boots and shoes are changed to avoid contamination with unseen pathogens. Absolute hygiene is essential at this stage to avoid the risk of importing disease into the pens. 3 to 4 chicks are assigned to each pen. They grow fast and are gradually given more grass to explore. These long-legged birds need plenty of space to exercise their muscles. The chicks have all the essential instincts they need to survive, pecking insects at every opportunity. Without parents to brood them, they huddle under heat lamps at night. These also attract convenient bedtime snacks. The whole enterprise is soon running at full steam. Plenty of clover grows in the pens, and it attracts a host of insects for hungry beaks to hunt.
Curlews are just such busy little birds. They are absolutely adorable. Everybody that works with them that I know thinks so. They're constantly on the move, foraging, looking for wild food. It's really important that we give them as much environmental enrichment as possible. It's been fantastic to have water pumped up from the marsh into the curlew pens. This gives the curlews a really natural foraging experience, and all those lovely goodies coming up from the marsh is just so good for them.
The ground is sprayed to keep it moist and rich in life, allowing the young curlews to forage naturally. They continue to grow here until, at 30 days old, it's time for their next step. Project partners, the British Trust for Ornithology, arrive for a weigh-in and a health check. These expert BTO ringers are preparing to apply a set of 3 new leg rings for future identification.
Okay. This one is orange 2.
I think that's good.
Yes. Body condition 2. Legs have been moving nicely.
Having passed their health check, the chicks are at last looking and sounding more like grown-up curlews. They're now sporting the latest fashion in leg rings, wearing both BTO metal rings and bright yellow leg flags for identification in the field. In addition to abundant wild food, the young curlews eat a specially prepared diet with all the nutrients they need for healthy growth. Without realising it, they're preparing themselves for the next stage of their lives, preening their feathers, rushing around and flapping wildly to strengthen their wings. The strongest birds are fitted with the latest technology. Satellite tracking devices, which will record their future movements, are carefully strapped onto their backs. In previous years of the project, tracked curlews have behaved in fascinating and unpredictable ways. While one Norfolk bird initially roamed only locally, another travelled west across England to Ireland, then south into the Atlantic, before realising its error and heading homeward. Two release sites have been chosen in Norfolk, one inland at the Sandringham estate, and this one, overlooking the wash at Wild Ken Hill. On release day, it's a tense wait for everyone involved. Nothing must be allowed to frighten the birds, as a panel is removed from the end of their enclosure, allowing them to wander into the wild.
It's really special to see the curlews go on release day, to be there with the team that have helped me rear them and see them being released and flying off into the wild. It's just brilliant.
Meanwhile, far away to the north in the Scottish Hebrides, another red-listed species is in desperate need of help to prevent its extinction in the British Isles. Not the curlew, but a small, brown, long-distance migrant bird, so secretive as to be seldom seen. The wild places where they still live have changed little over centuries. Traditional farming here does little to disturb the semi-natural grassland known as the maca, which is home to this noisy little bird, the corncrake. This terrain in the Hebrides is perfect for ground nesting corncrakes, but it is now the last place in the UK where they breed. They have evolved as highly successful ground nesters, perfectly camouflaged against aerial predators like the buzzard. Instinctively, they choose dense natural cover for nesting, laying and hatching their eggs. This recent footage reveals behaviour which has never been filmed before. The female bird has just hatched her eggs and is eating the shells. As the first chicks emerge, the female talks to them softly with a variety of grunts and hums, encouraging them to break free. Before even leaving the egg, the chicks reply to their mother with tiny squeaks. Quickly moving the brood away from the nest into dense vegetation is essential for their survival. For centuries, corncrakes nested commonly in organic arable crops and hay meadows across the UK. But with the intensification of arable agriculture in the 19th century and the 20th century shift from hay to modern silage fields, the species declined catastrophically. In the UK, corncrakes now cling to the very edge of existence in the Hebrides. However, thanks to the work of Deepdale Conservation Trust and many partners, there is perhaps hope for the corncrake in England. 60 specially designed pens have been constructed at Marsh Farm, Deepdale, for a breeding flock of corncrakes. Once again, the work has taken place under Chrissy Kelly's experienced direction.
My love of birds really has been with me since childhood. I have a book when I was about 6 saying my new hobby is ducks, and never really looked back since. I've worked in aviculture now for around 35 years. I studied zoology at university and really worked with birds ever since, in America and in the UK, with species of cranes, many species of waterfowl, waders, turtle doves, lots of different species, and of course corncrakes and curlews. It's been fantastic starting afresh here at Deepdale. With Andrew's kindness and enthusiasm to set up the projects here has been absolutely fantastic. I've worked with the corncrake breeding programme for around 17 years. First started rearing them in the year 2000, but the breed and release programme for the last 17 years, and I've probably reared nearly 2,000 corncrakes for release into the wild over that period.
In the autumn of 2024, the world's only captive breeding flock of corncrakes moved into a newly constructed winter facility at Deepdale Conservation Trust. To keep the birds safe through winter, their quarters have been carefully insulated from cold, damp, and even noise. The floor has a thick layer of soft sand and heating elements to keep the birds' feet warm and dry. Cypress branches offer plenty of cover, where these shy birds can feel safe. To maintain strict biosecurity and reduce stress on the birds, only Mark and Chrissy feed and water the corncrakes over the winter. Once released, the birds quickly settle into their new home, and remote cameras allow their well-being and behaviour to be monitored night and day. Because corncrakes are seasonal migrants, their hours of daylight and nighttime are adjusted to replicate a winter in Africa. Infrared lamps are used for night surveillance, revealing many details of the crake's nocturnal behaviour.
It's always an exciting day when the corncrakes come out of their winter quarters and into their breeding aviaries at the beginning of spring.
In early April, the birds migrate a full 200 metres in soft cloth bags from the Africa of their winter sheds to the Norfolk grassland of the breeding pens. Before the birds are released into their pens, vets give them a full health check, ensuring they're fit and strong and in the best condition to breed.
You can raise them if you like and carry on.
Yeah, you happy? Once checked, each bird is moved to the right pen, in readiness for the breeding season ahead.
When we go in and feed the birds, we only occasionally get a glimpse of them in there. The pens have been planted up with a mixture of wildflowers, nettles and some big grasses. So, you know, they're really secretive and they do like to hide away. But we're constantly trying to sort of very quietly observe them.
This little wooden shed is the headquarters of Deepdale's corncrake breeding operation.
We've got several girls laying. We pair the birds up according to their stud book data, so we know the genetic history of each individual, so we can put most unrelated birds together. So they go into the pens, and soon the male will start quexing. They'll stand on the wooden tables or the big tufts of grass that we've put in there and start quexing away. And this doesn't take long before all the other males start to quex as well. This can go on day and night to impress the female. We put the pairs together, and after a couple of weeks, if they like each other, the female should have started laying her clutch of eggs. So at this time, I'll go in and have a look carefully around the pen to see if I can see a scrape or a scrape with some eggs in it, to see if that pair bond has been good and breeding successful. There's a scrape there. So once we've found a scrape or a nest, we have a chart on the outside of the door, and I'll mark down where I've spotted that, so that next time when I go in, I can locate the nest and see how many more eggs have been laid. It's important to take the male out of the pen to allow the female peace and quiet to incubate the eggs alone. It's the female alone that's responsible for incubating, hatching and rearing the chicks. She will lay 1, occasionally 2 eggs every day. Usually a clutch is between 8 and 12 eggs. The incubation period's around 16 days. It's just a simple process of counting the eggs to understand when those chicks might hatch. Historically, we used to hand rear all the corncrake chicks, which worked really well. So we'd bring the eggs in just before they were due to hatch, and then hatch them artificially and then rear them by a technique of puppet rearing, which for a corncrake was a brown sock. It was really successful, but in 2019, we really wanted to trial parent rearing because obviously it's very labour intensive. These chicks need feeding every hour from about 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. So to have the female rear their own chicks, A, it's a much more natural way of doing it, and B, it's a lot less labour intensive and therefore costly for any conservation project. It's been really interesting to capture on film some of the behaviour between the mum and chicks after hatching when they're still on the nest. It's absolutely fascinating to watch the female interact with her chicks. And the number of vocalisations she has. She can get quite annoyed with them. We've seen her just actually grabbing them and bringing them back to the nest if she thinks there's danger close by. Over a couple of days, the chicks are really mobile and ready to move off the nest.
Once feeding themselves, corncrake chicks grow amazingly fast. As their adult plumage begins to develop, they change from fluffy black to camouflaged mottled brown. At 10 to 14 days of age, wild chicks are independent of their mothers. So this is when the captive bred chicks are moved to the site where they will be released. In 2025, a new release site has been chosen, in Yorkshire.
This year, Deepdale Conservation Trust have partnered with Lower Derwent National Nature Reserve. So the chicks are transferred up to the Lower Derwent for another 3 weeks before being released onto the reserve there. I met Craig, the head warden up there, earlier on in the year to discuss the location of the rearing pens and also look at the water meadows and areas where the birds will be released. And hopefully return the following year to find other corncrakes and have a successful breeding season. Craig and some of his volunteers came over to learn about how the food is mixed up and the level of nutrients that the birds need to be given and how they're fed. We went through all the protocols and they took away with them all the ingredients for the best corncrake food possible. It's really important to get the diet right and how that transitions over the period of time up to release.
Though the birds' journey from Deepdale to Yorkshire is only 4 hours, once wild they have a much longer journey ahead of them.
These small birds have a long way to migrate from Britain, so they travel all the way down across Europe, across North Africa, across the Sahara, down to Western Africa, we believe. They stop off there for a short time before then making another stop for their final resting place in the Congo Basin. And then, the following spring, make their way all the way back to usually within about 2 kilometres of where they were released the previous year. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm really proud of this site and the work we do here, and really want to share the knowledge that we've gained over the years and with other people. A bit like the Irish group that came over that got potential to have a project over there. So it was really brilliant just to talk to other corncrake enthusiasts.
To keep the young corncrakes calm, they make the journey by road to Yorkshire overnight.
They travel by night because it's such a long distance, and corncrakes don't feed at night, and it's nice and cool and quiet. So we put them into boxes that they're going to be transferred, and each box will go into a pen up at the Lower Derwent.
Put a little seatbelt on. Yeah, that's what we do.
We transfer late at night because it's quite a long journey, and corncrake chicks don't feed at night, so it makes sense to be really nice and quiet when they're not feeding and it's nice and cool, and then they'll be transported and they'll be ready to be put into the pens at first light. Not just me here. I have a great team that are employed for the really busy season of hatching and rearing all the chicks for both the projects. So they come and live on site, so they can be here to do the evening checks and make sure everybody's all right when I have a day off occasionally. We also have volunteers that have been absolutely essential, and it's great to have, just conservation projects that people can really come and get stuck into and feel as though they're doing some really valuable work, which they are. It's been brilliant having them on board.
At first light, on a summer morning, the birds are caught in their pre-release pens. After such effort by so many people, the time has finally come for Craig to release corncrakes on the reserve he protects with such care.
The release today of another 4 corncrakes back into the Lower Derwent Valley is an absolute dream for me. This has been a long time coming, To me, this is a missing iconic species in this landscape. Putting the sound of corn crakes back into the valley amongst curlews and drumming snipe in amongst these fantastic flower-filled meadows is really putting a kind of missing piece of the jigsaw back into the landscape.
The corncrakes are a really special bird, and anybody that started working with them will get this. We have an expression, well, you've been corncraked, because they do become a bit of an obsession. They're just so fascinating. The way they incubate and hatch and rear the chicks, and in the wild, you know, those chicks are independent by 10 days old and will continue to self-feed and then navigate their way to the Congo and then back again. I feel privileged to work so closely with corncrakes. Not many people get to see them. Their plumage is just beautiful. They're this mixture of earthy tones of browns and buffs and yellows, and the dark flecks on the edges of their feathers create streaks down their back, which is perfect camouflage for their grassy habitat, of course. In the breeding season, the cheeks of the male turn this greyish-blue colour, which contrasts the deep chestnut eyes. They are just beautiful little birds. I like to think this place is a centre of hope for the corncrakes, to establish them back into meadows across England and to be heard by generations to come.
Since Andrew Crean first dreamed of restoring a Norfolk marsh, the conservation work of Marsh Farm, Deepdale, has blossomed and grown. Now, it is home not only to the wild birds of the marsh, but also to the world's only captive breeding flock of corncrakes. And to curlews, saved as eggs from destruction and destined, like so many birds, to stretch their wings along the wild North Norfolk coast.